Hey everyone, it's Jalen. I'm here today with another writing video. Today I'm going to be talking about my writing process as someone who's pantsing a novel. To talk about pantsing a novel. If you're not familiar with the terms plotting and pantsing, pantsing refers to writing without an outline. It comes from flying by the seat of your pants. And plotting comes from, well, it means exactly what it means, plotting, which is writing from an outline. I want to talk about my process as a pantser because I recently started pantsing again. First, I'm going to start off by talking about why I decided to pants a novel and why I've made the switch. And then I'm going to talk about my process as a pantser, what steps I'm taking in order to avoid common pitfalls of pantsing, or at least avoid problems I've had in the past, even avoid problems I've had with plotted novels. So I'm going to start by talking about personally for me, why I decided to pants a novel and my story with it. If you just want to skip to the process part, I'll leave a timestamp for that right here. I pantsed my first 4 novels. And the reason I pantsed them is because I never really considered doing otherwise. When I wrote my first novel, I was 13 years old. I did not know any other writers. I was not in the online writing community at all. So I just did things the way that was most natural for me to do things. I literally didn't even take notes. I didn't write a single thing down. I would plan in my head. Either I forgot a lot of really important stuff, or I just had a really immaculate memory at the time. Obviously, those novels are all flaming garbage trash. Are they flaming garbage trash because they were pantsed, or are they flaming garbage trash because I wrote them when I was 13? I would put money on the latter. I think they would have been flaming garbage trash even if I had outlined them. And then I started getting more involved with the online writing community. I didn't really interact. I had my channel at this point in time. I was a booktuber. I was doing NaNoWriMo. Anyways, I started to become, through the internet, exposed to other ways that one could write a book, and that included the idea of outlining. The first book I ever outlined was my novel Chain Reaction, and I outlined it because it was NaNoWriMo. When it comes to NaNoWriMo, I am one competitive bitch. Not competitive in other facets of my life. I was once a competitive athlete, and the being competitive part of it was very hard for me. I was like, but do I care about winning? No. Not that competitive, except NaNoWriMo. Suddenly, I became a heathen of competitivity. And I was mostly competitive with myself. I cared so much about doing NaNoWriMo. I looked forward to it all year. And so in 2014, I was planning for NaNoWriMo, and I kind of was like, I think I should make an outline this year. I think that might help me win NaNoWriMo. That was the key. Everything I did was just to win NaNoWriMo because priorities. So when I made this outline, I hadn't taken any notes. The book had been in my head for literally years, and I had never written down a thought ever on the book. It was just all in here. And I don't know how I stored it all in there. I feel like my brain's not big enough anymore. There's too much stuff in there. But my theory is that at the time I was younger and my brain hadn't filled up yet, it wasn't at capacity, so it could still fit the entire contents of a novel. My brain is full of information, and so it has to be stored on like an external hard drive. At the time, my brain was not full. It wasn't constantly getting error messages. It wasn't like, your disk drive is almost full. Like, see, it's great. This disk drive is almost full. This disk drive is almost full. We're living a time. The disk drive still was not full, and so my brain could fit a whole novel in there. So, anyways, I made an outline, and I think I did the outline in 3 days. And then I wrote the book, and I won NaNoWriMo in 23 days. That's the highest word output ever in my life. I will never do that again, probably, and I don't strive to. I'm not like, oh, if only I could write 50,000 words in 23 days, but I did at the time. It's always the book I forget I've written, just because it happened in a fever dream of one November. I just dreamt it up, and suddenly it was there. And after that, I was like, outlining is the best thing ever, because it had helped me win NaNoWriMo super fast. I was like, damn, when I outline, I'm a productive bitch, and I wanted to be a productive bitch because I had so many novels I wanted to write. So in my mind, it was like the faster I can write them, the more I can write, and then I can get to all these other ideas that I'm excited to write. It was honestly a very pure, untainted view of the writing process. I was still young and I hadn't been hurt by the world. And from that point on, I was just like, outlining is the way to go. I never thought I would go back. When I looked at the novel I outlined, it was also the strongest novel I'd ever written. I mean, when I look back at it now, it's not strong at all. It was legitimately way stronger in the plot because in my old novels, my first 4 novels that I pantsed, I meandered through them. I would write and I didn't know what would happen next, and so I would meander, and there was a lot of pointless, repetitive, useless content in there because I didn't outline, and also I was 14. So then when I wrote this novel that I had outlined, looking back, there are plot holes, and there are a lot of things that are, like, I plan to rewrite this novel, and I would do it very differently now, but it was still a pretty tight plot line for my capabilities as a writer. Like, it was the tightest plot line I'd ever written because there wasn't a lot of extraneous stuff. It was the opposite. It actually needed more stuff in it. And that's also when I started outlining, is when I became an underwriter, because when I was pantsing, you just keep adding stuff until you're like, oh, the book's done. My first 4 novels, oh, never mind, I pantsed my first 3 novels, not my first 4. Chain Reaction was my 4th novel. I thought it was my 5th. It was my 4th. My first 3 novels that I pantsed were all literally within 3K of 90,000 words. Because for some reason in my mind, a novel was 90,000 words, and when I got there, I was like, well, she's done. I was a misguided child, in case you hadn't noticed. This video is just like roast of young Shaylin. But, like, there's so much that's roastable about her. She made so many mistakes. She was so misguided. So I then switched to outlining, and it was great. And I preached that shit. I had this channel. When I talked about my writing process, it was always, I make an outline, I make an outline, I'm never going back, I make an outline. In my mind, I would never go back because it really did do good things for my writing process. Like, I'm not gonna say, oh no, actually I should have continued pantsing, because legitimately, plotting was really necessary for me. It did teach me how to write a better book. I started writing short stories in the fall of 2016 for a writing class, and I pantsed my short stories. Quickly within writing short stories, I kind of started to go, wait a second, the quality in these short stories is better than the quality of my novels. I wasn't sure why that was. I was like, okay, I try to write a novel, but it's just not as good, and the scenes aren't as strong, the line isn't as strong, it's not as strong. And I was over here pantsing short stories and plotting novels, and I thought that that's just how I would work. And obviously they're different forms, so it's natural to have a different process for different things. But I was starting to noticing that I could write higher quality than I was writing in novels. Like, when I started writing short stories, it kind of was like, oh, I'm capable of better things than I've been producing. Why can't I always produce like that, you know? Obviously how you won't always produce to assistant quality, like, it won't always be an uphill, it won't be everything you write is better than the last, but still, it was like, this novel is flaming garbage, why can't I do that? Why can't I do this here, you know? Why can't I write with that quality in a novel? The more I wrote novels after that point, so for the past 2 years, I started to feel very stifled. I didn't really know how I felt, but I just felt like something wasn't working. And I think it was just that comparison of how I felt when I sat down to pants a short story versus how I felt when I would plot a novel. I felt so inspired. Say I wrote 1,000 words in a sitting for a short story, it would be pantsed. I would leave that feeling pretty good about the majority of the 1,000 words, and I would actually be like, wow, I'm really happy with this. When I would write, say, a novel writing session, 1,000 words, I would literally read the whole thing and be like, none of this is good. Objectively, the quality is worse. Why is that? Is it because it's a novel? Or is it because it's a different process? I had this idea in my mind that I couldn't pants a novel. I had this idea in my mind that I'm a mess. Pantsing a novel is just gonna make me more of a mess. I have to not be a mess. Then I started writing a novel for school. I'm in a novel writing workshop in January. And so I had to come up with a novel. None of the novels I had sitting in my brain really just felt either ready or workshopable. I didn't have time to plan it the way I would normally plan. I didn't have time to outline the whole thing. I'm a slow generator of material. It takes me quite a while to develop the entire plot of a novel, and I was like, I don't have time to outline this. Plus, I'm not even writing the whole thing, I'm just writing the beginning. So I started pantsing it. And I noticed the difference immediately. And I don't know why it is that my line work and my scene work is better when I pants. I wish I knew so I could hack my own process. As I started drafting this book and gotten deeper and deeper into drafting the book and pantsing it, I was like, this is the way to go for me. This is better. And it was about time I changed my process. I'd been feeling so confined by it. And it was just like, something has to change. maybe it should be like one of the drastic changes in process we can do from plotting to pantsing. And I'm loving it. It's going great. All that time being a plotter really was necessary for me to teach me story structure and teach me how to see a story. I had to write from an outline in order to understand the framework of a story. Kind of the way I feel about it for me personally now is that I would pants things that are like lit fic or contemporary books that aren't very plotty. For something that is quite plotty, fantasy, sci-fi, I mean, if I were to write those genres, I would outline those. Because I think those storylines, for me personally, if they're quite plotty, would really require me to work from an outline. For some people, they can get a better view of their story out like this. But I'm better when I'm zoomed in. I work better when I'm in it. And I find that I actually run into a lot of plot-related problems because of outlining. The main ones are stitching together my events, kind of like wedging events together and not realizing they don't really fit together because I haven't written the scenes yet. Like, I'm planning things that are going to happen down the line when I haven't written this yet. And sure, I can know what the scene is, but when I write it, it sometimes comes out different. That's just me. And the main reason for that is character. Same thing, I can plan my character and know the character so well, but they always are a little different on the page. When I start writing them, I always learn a bit more about them, and that's what happens. Your character evolves with you. When I say you, I mean me, as you write, and suddenly all the events you've planned based on this character motivation don't make sense anymore. I have had so many issues with character motivation in my work. It's because of the outline. It's because in my mind, I was like, this is the character's motivation and this is why they do things. And then I start writing and the character changes, and even if those changes are kind of small, they really domino over time, and suddenly it doesn't align anymore. I don't know if that's making sense, but it might make sense. You might relate to that. Scene construction. I notice when I'm pantsing that my scene construction is much more complex and interesting. Like, it's not something I can conceptualize zoomed out. Other writers might be able to conceptualize non-linear temporal construction and plot construction zoomed out, but I've learned that I'm better when I'm in it, and I've learned that I'm better going piece by piece, working my way through it, in it, than zoomed out. It's different for everyone, but that's how my brain works best. I have been pantsing this novel, and it's been going super great. So I thought I would talk a bit about my pantsing process. Obviously, the first part of this video ended up being much longer than I meant for it to be. The thing about me pantsing is I actually do have an outline. I just build it as I'm writing. So I've basically taken the process I would use to write a short story, which I will actually leave a link to in the cards because that I explain the process in a video, and I've transposed it and turned it into a process for writing novels. So I do have an outline. But it is being built as I'm writing. Because I do think an outline is a useful tool for editing, post-drafting. It's not like I never know anything about the plot. My brain can sometimes be a little bit ahead of where I am. So the first thing I have at the start is a little overview, and I have the date, so this chapter takes place over June 2000 to August 2000, and then I kind of describe the general, like, what this chapter does. That's another thing I'll mention. I'm finding my chapters are different when I pants, and I like it. I'm finding when I pants, my chapters are a little more cohesive, almost like a little mini short story, but like not really because it's within a bigger arc, whereas I found that I feel like there's more of a concept to each chapter, whereas I felt when I was outlining, the chapters would end for the sake of readability. Like, I would be like, okay, end here because it makes sense for the chapter to end here. So first of all, I write a little overview. Now, the thing about this chapter is that I did outline this chapter before writing it. Because I started drafting, and after I'd been drafting for a little bit, I could see how the chapter would go, so I jotted it all down in my outline. But then if we look at chapter 2, so there's a little overview. So this chapter is chapter 2, it's called Mother Bird. There's almost no detail. That's because I full on pants this chapter. When I started this chapter, I had no idea how things were going to be structured. I kind of just rolled with it. Now, when I say I rolled with it, it's not like I just make things up randomly. I feel like that's a big misconception about pantsing, is like, you just make things up, you just throw things in. No, When I write a scene that is necessitated by the previous scene. That's my motto, is what has to happen. I run into a lot of issues with causality. Also, when I'm plotting, causality has been a big issue for me, and it's the same thing. When I was outlining it, these scenes were linked by this thing, but when I actually write it, it comes out a little different. It has nothing to do with how much or how little detail is in the outline. It doesn't matter. It happens to do with subtle, small shifts that happen when I'm drafting in the characters that I just can't avoid. That's just how it works for me. When I'm drafting, my characters are going to change a little, they're going to grow a little, and I'm going to learn more about them. It's not like I'm just like, what random thing could happen today? Maybe a clown shows up, you know? Now, I do make this outline so that I can maintain a bird's eye view of my story as I'm writing it. So I can easily go back and check things and see the structure of things and stay organized and make it easier to write synopsis and summary and stuff. But I don't want it while I'm drafting. So yeah, we can see again in chapter 3, there's a lot more detail. That's because when I was writing chapter 2, chapter 3 also clicked. I was like, oh wait, chapter 3 is going to be like this. So this is kind of the document, the outline that I build as I'm drafting. And I find it very helpful and very useful. So that's one of the key documents I use. The other one I use is a scene list. Now, it's possible almost all of this will be blacked out. My scene list is an out-of-order list of scenes. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's literally just a list of scenes that might happen. This is just where I store ideas, basically. It has the ending even, because I realized how the book was going to end. That's kind of how that works. Other than that, the only other document I have is a notes document. The notes document is something that I have for every single book. It's where I thought dump notes. So I have the log line, I have some stuff on the form. This was from before I started writing. So when I was initially planning the book, like I just got the idea, I noted that Sybil was the protagonist and the narrator. In terms of actual writing, I will say that I find pantsing much more enjoyable. For me, one of the key benefits of plotting was that it prevented writer's block. You know, I would get everything out of the way and then I would write, and that's something that I noticed is a huge benefit. That first NaNoWriMo novel that I outlined, and I could just write without stopping for 23 days because I knew what happened. However, as I've gotten older, I've started to find myself struggling more to write from an outline, struggling more to make progress even when there is an outline, finding my brain much more ignited with creativity when I'm pantsing. Maybe more than anything, I think it's very important that you enjoy your writing process. If you outline because it's kind of a general consensus in the writing community that outlining is better and your book will be a mess if you pants it, but you hate outlining, you don't have to. You want to write in a way that you like. Like, if you write because you love it, but you've created a process for yourself that you don't like, that's probably not the right process for you. And realizing that I wasn't enjoying writing as much when I was plotting as when I was pantsing was a huge revelation. I think careful pantsing can lead to a similar quality of work as an outlined novel if it's what's right for the writer. Like, as I talked about, I have issues that arise because I outline. That might not be the case for other people. Other people might have no personal benefits to pantsing and should just plot. If there are benefits for you for pantsing, look at ways to create a writing process where you can avoid the downside. So one of the cons for me, one of the things I really need is that I'm bad at timeline. I lose track of time, so I decided to carefully make an outline as I was drafting so that I could keep track of the time frame and always know the chronology. Hack your process. Find a way to get around the issue you're having for you personally. It's all about what works best for you personally. In the past, it's been very easy for me to tell people to just make an outline. It was in that mindset where outlining was the best. There were definitely people who sent me questions and I said, make an outline. To me, I really thought that that was the solution. And a lot of people, I think, feel this way, that pantsing is irresponsible or inexperienced or lazy. It's neither of those things. It's just about what works for you. I enjoy writing more when I'm pantsing. And also, kind of a fact, my writing is better when I enjoy writing. I'm gonna wrap up this video. That's my pantsing process. If you're a pantser and you have any pantsing hacks to make the process easier, also let me know, because I would love to know the hacks. These are the things that have been helping me. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, you can always send me an ask on Tumblr, and I'll see you in another video.